I don't want to stay this way forever. I want my own body. Here's your look at new Kotobukiya, Darkstalkers Lilith, Bishoujo's statue. A dangerous Lilith was born from Morrigan's soul and based on a new drawing from Shunya Yamashita. The statue shows Lilith's slender, youthful bodyline and adorable, innocent expression, but it also gives glimpses of her ruthlessness and bewitchment. Could they be signs of her being a former succubus? Her underarms and ribs are highlighted by curving her upper body, and mesmerizing, delicate movements of her shoulder blades have been sculpted by Tsubame. The sinister wings are sculpted to give a different expression when viewed from the front or back, and follow the same specifications as those of Morrigan. Along with Lilith's serpentuous cruelty, it expresses her lineage as the other self of that soul. Before we see what's new from Bishoujo, I'd like to thank the folks over at Kotobukiya that did in fact provide this sample of the upcoming release, Darkstalkers Lilith. The reason why I do say upcoming is that many of the online sites that have the pre-order available for the statue list the release date of February 2023. So we're getting an early sneak peek at what the statue is going to look like, should you be interested to order one for yourself. But again, I'd like to thank the folks over at Kotobukiya that did provide this early look at Lilith that we could check out in this video. Following up to that, grabbing the tape measure as I always do, clickety-click right to the very top, I'm going to go to the wings that stick out the side of her head, as that being the highest point for the statue. With that in mind, Lilith stands at about 8.5 inches in height, or the statue's 21 centimeters tall. And then to compare Lilith with the other two Bishoujo statues that we've already checked out on this channel, here's what she looks like next to Morrigan. Two characters very much more just connected than just the bases that are about to interlock, as the two bases do interlock somewhat together, but they also share a similar soul as well. Here's what she also looks like next to Felicia, and clearly to see that of the three statues, Felicia is still the tallest, and because of course Morrigan is hunched over the way that she is, Felicia's taller than Morrigan, but not as tall as Felicia. The character of Lilith actually made her debut in Vampire Savior, which is often referred outside of Japan as Darkstalkers 3. The thing is, though, Lilith has never really been a playable character. The closest that she's ever really gotten to being a playable character was in Marvel vs. Capcom, where there was an alternate costume change of Morrigan, which in fact had a similar palette to what we got with Lilith. It was the closest thing that we ever got to Lilith being a playable character. But up to this point, I don't think she's ever been released as something you can actually fight her with in the game. One thing you'll also see very obviously, and I'll bring back in Morrigan in a second so you can even see the further proof to that, is that they are sharing very much similar elements to their costume. Their colors are granted different, very much different from one another, but a lot of the same checked off boxes you'll be checking off for Lilith were already checked off for the Morrigan we looked at before. Now, I did allude earlier into this part of this review that the bases actually do interlock with one another. The neat thing about them is that while looking at the base right now, it seems like a fully intact base. Nice colors of both the purple transitioning into a very nice soft pink, and then a more lighter coloring of almost like a yellow, a very soft chalk yellow in the middle. The neat thing about the bases, just to bring back in Morrigan so you can see here for a second, even though they're using the same colors, it's very obvious to see that Lilith is using a brighter version of those colors more than the darker, diminished color scheme that Morrigan had with hers. But when we had a look at Morrigan, and I may have even commented on in her review, while we have this cobblestone base that is actually from the stage, if you look to the back of the base, though, you'll see like there's one part where cobblestone stone seems to be missing. The neat thing about it, though, is while they don't necessarily interlock with one another, you can get them pretty close to one another. And then the bases give you somewhat a finished base. And the reasoning why they sculpted the statues the way that they did, if you turn the bases towards you, the characters are still technically facing you, but they're kind of sort of the half, the dark and the light side of the characters. I really think that's a clever use the way they've done that. And by also seeing the way that the colors of the base change, brighter here on the one side for Lilith, more darker when we get to Morrigan, it's again a nice copy, like a kind of dark and light side of the character's soul. Really clever the way that they've done that. And it's also, too, effectively the way they've sculpted the wings. Even though the wings come pretty close to one another, not to the point where they actually start rubbing up against one another, they actually fit and align perfectly where they fill in the spot. I don't know if you can actually see this or not. Lilith's wing doesn't even come close to Morgan's, but it looks like that they're very much kind of just, again, back to back with one another. Really smart the way they did that. Let's go ahead and move Morgan out of the way. I'm going to be bringing back her in a moment. But again, because the costumes are very much the same, what you'll see is they're the very similar type of tights with the little bat symbol there is all printed down the top, from the top of the thigh all the way down to the bottom of the boots. Morgan's was a little bit more darker, so it was a lot easier to see those symbols painted all in there. I don't know if you can also even see there's these tiny little eyes actually in the head of the bat. Something also that they carry over as well. The suits are somewhat similar. Morgan fills hers out a little bit more. As you can see, Morgan had the heart in the middle of hers. Lilith, on the other hand, has actually more of a diamond shape. Colors are very much different. We'll talk more about more in a moment. Morgan had also the fur there on her shoulders, barely keeping themselves together. And you can also see as well that Lilith has the same approach. Although I've noticed one thing, the difference between the two, Morgan's almost seems more painted fur. But however, though, when you actually look at Lilith's to me comes at least across like it's more using translucent plastic, slightly purple tinted, but seeming to be more translucent purple plastic, unlike the Morgan we looked at before. She also does have the same wings as well. So, I mean, again, when we just bring back in Morgan's, you can see the wings are very much sculpted the same. Lilith's, those seem slightly smaller and also curved inward. The backs of the bodies also share a very similar looking suit. And she also has, much like Morgan, the wings that stick out the top of her head. Speaking of the tops of her head, spinning the statue around, obviously you guys will want to see the finer features of this statue. What a glorious, again, statue that they've done here. Kotobukiya picked a perfect franchise, I think, to translate to the Bishoujo statues. We've looked at countless Bishoujo statues here on this channel, and again, like the transition might be a little more stark as you have more realistic human characters, like the horror variety that we've looked at. Translates almost to, again, more of an anime vibe. Darkstalkers was already very rooted in animation style, or that anime design. It translates extremely well, I feel, to a Bishoujo line of statues. Face sculpt-wise, so you can actually see what's going on here with Lilith. Again, a pretty-looking, playful portrait. I love the large look of the eyes, and again, the way they've used the rusted red. There's a little bit of reflection off to the corners of the eyes as well. Soft colors on the pink, and again, like the color scheme of her, again, just to bring back in Morgan. Even though she's pale in color, she doesn't seem as pale in nature as when we looked at the Morgan before. Again, with the sculpting of the wings, for example, they do stick out the sides of her face. I guess before we look at that, I love the coloring also of the hair. It's lighter to the top, it's darker around the points and the tips of the hair, and a nice transition between the two color schemes. But yeah, these wings, not only are they bright and red, but they're also a little more in the brittle plastic variety. I mean, obviously it goes without saying, these statues are all made of plastic anyways, but things like small wings that stick out the sides of Lilith's head, for example, you just want to be careful that you don't bang these. I don't know if you can hear this or not. Yeah, it's a little bit more of a brittle plastic, not something that's going to break right away, but certainly if it does take a tumble, it does get banged on your statue shelf. There's always the risk that that could potentially break. These wings, again, are glorious on the sides of her body. They basically jet out the back of her torso the same way as Morgan, but the use of the red that they did here, Morgan's was, again, very much rooted in black. The inside of her wings, again, use more of a, I think what they do is they make the plastic on the wings translucent, and then they go and paint the parts in there instead with a different color. Morgan's was more purple, with the outer ends of the wings being black. Lilith's, on the other hand, are all a very more blood red on the outside. And then on the inside, it would be kind of hard to describe this. Under certain lit conditions, it looks a little bit more like an off-green color. There's a little bit of traces of black, but mostly what I'm seeing here is green. So it looks like, once again, they were using a translucent plastic for the wings, and then they've gone and very meticulously painted the parts over top of that. The red does match also very close to what we get here for the front of her costume. In the middle, though, it kind of comes across a little bit more on the pinkish side, but it's very close in color scheme. And again, what I do really like also about the statue, too, is while there's more lighter colors being used here for the thighs and lighter colors being used for the gloves here, they've added some airbrushing in there as well. So it's not just the one color happening here. You see a little more traces of the darker color, more around the areas where it wraps around her fingers, and you get a lot more of that shaded blue. You can see like outlining the areas of her thighs all the way down the sides of her knees as well. There's really a lot of nice use of color here. Something I also really like about this statue, unlike Morgan, who had her 2 feet very firmly planted on the base, Lilith actually has one foot lifted. And again, you can see some really nice additional darker red added to the already nice ruby red that they've used for the base. All in all, it's a really nice looking statue. Effectively done once again by the folks over at Kotobukiya. And again, I really like I'm just going to bring back in Morgan here. One thing, again, I really like about the bases is that you can have them displayed separately, as you can see right now. Or what you can also do as well is that they do, again, mentioned already, interlock to one another. And even though they're interlocking, they're not necessarily looking out to the sides. They have effectively turned the heads just a slight bit, so that even while you have the two connected on your statue shelf, the statues are still looking outward at you, and you can still see their very pretty faces being posed. Well, seeing as both characters do technically share the same body in the Darkstalkers game, I thought it would be fitting enough to have Lilith here on the turntable spinning in final looks along with Morgan. What I like about both of the statues is that they stand on their own. No, I don't mean the fact that the statue's base prevents the statues from falling over, more so for the fact that they feel complete. When we had a look at Morgan, there was nothing really to be a telltale sign that Morgan was a part of a bigger picture, a part of a bigger statue. Yes, there was a stone missing on the back of her base, and I don't even know if I had mentioned it in the review or not. I just chalked it up to the way they sculpted the base. But now, of course, now that we're finally having a look at Lilith, it makes all the perfect sense as to why the back of the base like that is missing a very obvious part of the stone. It does connect the two together. Now, even the statue's bases, even though they do interlock, the color schemes even on both of them are different from one another. Lilith has very obviously a brighter looking color scheme of the same purples, the same pinks, and the same yellows, whereas Morgan has the more darker color scheme. But yeah, even if you are only interested to get the Morgan, I myself, of the three statues that Kotobukiya had provided, I still think that Morgan is my favorite of the three. I really like the look of Lilith, and Felicia, to be fair, was a great looking statue as well, but I think of the three, my favorite still is Morgan. But if you are just interested to only get the Morgan, and only interested, just say, to pick up the Lilith when she eventually gets released, you can easily have them displayed on their own. But I gotta say, the sell of this set is the fact that you can actually pair them together on the shelf, back to back, and having the lighter and the darker side of the character being represented on your collection shelf. What do you guys think of Lilith? Let me know down below in the comments section. And have you been collecting the other Bishoujo statues that Kotobukiya have put out? If you have, let me know down below in the comments section what those statues were. And once again, speaking of Kotobukiya, I'd like to thank the folks over at Kotobukiya that did provide the sample of the upcoming released Darkstalkers Lilith that we could have a look at in this video. Speaking of videos, if you enjoyed this video, why not hit it with a like? If you love the content you guys are seeing and do want to stick around for more, then make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below and turn the bell notification on. Popping up also at the very end of this video, if you don't mind me plugging a playlist, if you did miss your chance to check out my review of both Morgan and Felicia already, popping at the very end will be a playlist of all the Kotobukiya statues I've looked at up to now, including the Lilith, including the Morgan, including the Felicia, if you have a little bit of time on your hands. There's going to be a lot more videos coming your way, guys. So as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.